All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're in the welterweight division, specifically going over what Floyd Mayweather Jr., by way of Leonard Ellerbe, had to say about Jaron Boots Ennis and the rest of the welterweights. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about the welterweight division, and you know, it's definitely one of the hottest boxing divisions in boxing. Floyd Mayweather Jr. lets it be known who he thinks is the future of that division and maybe the president of that division. And it is not Errol, Spence, or Terence Crawford. It is Jaron Boots Ennis. But before I get into that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please accept my invitation to subscribe to the channel and then hit the bell icon so that you can be notified of when we release more videos. Also, if you're a regular subscriber to the channel, longtime subscriber to the channel, thank you for your continued support. It is always a pleasure to chop it up about boxing with you. And you know we do that on a daily basis on this channel. So thank you for your support. All right, so we have the hottest division in boxing right now is the welterweight division. It is probably, I don't think there's much debate about it being the most stacked division in boxing. You have guys like Errol Spence Jr., who's a three belt holder, holds the WBA, the IBF, and the WBC. And you have Terence Bud Crawford, who by many people consider to be the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world, who is the WBO champion. However, one of the greatest fighters to ever to lace up of the gloves, and I think that's fair to say about Floyd, one of the greatest ever. I'm not somebody that's going to say that he's the greatest ever boxer. His boxing's been around a very, very long time, and there's just more fighters that have fought that I didn't see than fighters that have fought, right? So the best I think I can say for that is that he's the best fighter of this century, without a doubt. And this is Leonard Ellerbe giving quotes from Floyd Mayweather Jr. On a recent interview he did I just can't remember the name of the channel, but a recent interview that he did with a reporter that typically works with Top Rank, has a new podcast, Best Women's Podcast. I do believe that Best Women in Boxing Podcast. And talked about Floyd's reaction to Jaron Ennis and what he thinks about Jaron Ennis as far as being a fighter, in how good he is as a fighter. And Floyd Mayweather Jr. said, according to Leonard Ellerbe, that this is the best fighter that he's seen. He said this guy is going to be as good as I am. Now, if you do not get I don't think out of Floyd Mayweather Jr. you get anywhere near that level of comment for anybody else that I've heard him talks about people being, heck of a fighters, always says, he's a hell of a fighter, right? But that type of praise is something major. And the reason why he said that was the case was because of Jaron Ennis's dedication to the talent and dedication to the sport, and how he lives, breathes, lives, breathes, all that stuff, boxing, and the level of talent and the speed and the strength that he has. So the combination between the young man's work ethic, his fighting style, and his talent means that for him, says this guy is going to be as good as Floyd Mayweather Jr., which by necessity means that he is better than everybody else in that division, because you ain't never heard Floyd Mayweather Jr. say anything like that about anybody else, including Errol Spence Jr., including Terence Crawford, or anybody else that is in or around that division. That is a major, major compliment for Jaron Ennis. And my take on that is, I'm glad that he said it, because that is something that when I saw Jaron Ennis first start fighting, that's what I thought. Like, this kid, if this dude is, first of all, what I always thought was, if this guy has a chin, if he has a chin and he has some heart, for sure, like when he gets into battles and he gets touched, if he can get past that, this guy has, with his size, his length, his speed, his punching power. I'm not so big on the fact that he switches from orthodox to to Southpaw. That to me, I'm sorry, man, I'm not as big as on that as necessarily as other people's are because there's been so many great boxers that never did that. I think that is something that is more, now I wouldn't call it a fad, but maybe more of a fad now because of the success that Terence Crawford had with it, that a lot of people are trying it and doing that more often. But anyway, if you consider that to be a really great asset, he's got that too. Now, in my opinion, there's a difference though between saying that you are going to be at that level and you are at that level. Jaron Ennis is still a young fighter, so as far as like what he would do against somebody like Errol Spence Jr. right now, I'm not sure of the outcome of that fight, man. But I will tell you that I think that he has as good a chance to beat Errol Spence Jr. as anybody else, right? And that's one of the things that Leonard Ellerbe said in his portion of the interview, sharing his opinion, was like, yeah, when he's asked, do you think Errol Spence Jr. will fight Jaron Ennis? He's like, no, I don't think Jaron Ennis. I don't think Errol Spence Jr. would fight Jaron Ennis. Why would he do that? He's, at the stage where he's looking for the really big money fights, and despite how good Jaron Ennis is. Despite how good Jaron Ennis is, that he's not that type of paycheck and along with that type of risk for Errol to take. So, and he said same thing about Terence Crawford, that more than likely Jaron Ennis is not going to get that fight with Terence Crawford. No, at least not for a while, until he gets his marketability up and does, and actually has mainstream boxing fans looking at him and seeing him, in that particular light. One thing I do want to say, though, about something Leonard Ellerbe said in that interview, and I hope you guys actually that listen to the end of the chat, listen to this. He was really gave a really big bit of information in this particular interview when he was asked, talked about pay-per-view and the success of fighters on pay-per-view and what you need to do to be that, big crossover star or the big star in boxing. And in midst of talking about the necessity to go, be on like small networks like when Floyd was on BET back in the day, right? And to do that type of, he would drive like 22 hours straight to get from Las Vegas to Ohio for an event in Ohio, and doing that once every few months just so, people got a chance to see him. He gave out what he believed the number of the hard number for how many true hardcore boxing fans there are in the United States. I have to assume he's talking about in the United States because he's talking about pay-per-views and those are sold in the United States. He said that there is only a couple 100,000 hardcore boxing fans in the United States that would buy that and he said, I know this because I've got all the reports, all of the analytics for the pay-per-views. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. And that makes sense as to why Showtime puts a lot of these fighters on Showtime. And and they know that they can reliably get a certain amount of people to watch that fight and pay for that fight. And when they do that, then they can put the re-air it on Showtime. Makes a lot of sense to me, man. But so in order for Jaron Ennis to really get up to where Jaron Ennis, to where he has the same type of support that Floyd, is going to take a little bit of luck and it's going to take a lot of work and thinking outside the box, and as far as him going out and getting in front of people and doing interviews and really selling himself, if what he's interested in is being that big megastar, because that is definitely something Floyd Mayweather Jr. was doing. And as far as him having a greater potential or being able to beat Terence and Errol, totally believable on my part. The only question is, will he ever get the opportunity to actually do it with them, or is his future more set, with guys like Virgil, or getting a fight with Virgil Ortiz, getting fights with, Stanionis and really dominating the people who are within his age range. But anyway, you let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.